But the ultimate thing that unfortunately will stop me from getting this camera, and the reason that I wouldn't get a Sony camera is... What's up guys, Andrew Ref here, and today we are going to have a look at the brand new Canon M6 Mark II. And seriously, I am absolutely blown away with what this camera can do, considering it's the first kind of mirrorless camera that I've looked at. Absolutely blown away. So first, let's go through some of the specs of the M6 Mark II, and then I'll delve into what I liked and what I didn't like about it and my general experiences with it. So the Canon M6 Mark II is essentially the same camera as the Canon 90D, which is obviously in a lot smaller body. And that itself is a seriously impressive feat. Like, to be able to cram that much stuff into such a small body is mind-boggling to me. So it boasts a 32.5 megapixel sensor, can shoot up to 14 frames a second, and also has a raw burst mode of up to 30 frames a second, which is, I can't even comprehend that. That's just insane. It has the infamous dual pixel autofocus, which has been an absolute game changer for my line of work. I seriously would struggle to work without dual pixel autofocus now. It can shoot at 4K at up to 30 frames a second and 120 frames a second at full HD. It has this cool little removable viewfinder, which is really cool, and this actually comes in the box with the camera itself. It has eye autofocus in live view, and it has the Canon EF-M lens mount. So at first glance of this camera, I really wasn't expecting too much. I knew that it had the same internals as the Canon 90D, but you know, I didn't expect it to be as good as it was. But seriously, when I started using it, I got an absolute kick in the teeth, and I was blown away with the images that were coming out of this system. Now, for my line of work, I shoot mainly video, so a lot of the tests I did were actually around video. However, I did do a few photo tests as well to test out that side of the camera. So the first thing I wanted to test was the low light performance, because that has been one of the most asked questions when I put up my poll on my Instagram page. And here are a few clips I shot at nighttime, really pushing the ISO and kind of seeing just how much it'd break apart. For a lot of the night clips, I was shooting at 12,800 ISO, which is the max that it will go to before you start expanding it. And the reason I did this is because I just wanted to push it to its limit and then kind of see if it's even usable. And honestly, I was expecting the image to just be absolutely trash and not be usable at all. But I mean, obviously it's quite noisy because it is such a high ISO. But honestly, if you're using this as just like a little travel camera or a little vlogging camera, the image that comes out of it at 12,800 ISO is still completely usable. Like, I would definitely use that if this was the camera that I was shooting at. And if I had to push it to those limits, then I would be okay doing that. Now, I do have to mention that these clips were shot with the EF to EF-M adapter, and I was shooting on the Sigma 18-35 f1.8. So very light aperture, letting a lot of light in. But you can see that the images are quite well exposed, and that's kind of why I was going for that. The other thing to mention is that before I did the low light test, I actually put it side by side with my 16 Mark II, which is actually a full frame camera. A few things I tested were the face detection and the face tracking, as well as shooting in some quite harsh lighting conditions to test out the dynamic range as well. And I also want to test out the HDR video in comparison to shooting on the 6D2 that doesn't have HDR video, just to see kind of what the comparison would be like. And I also decided to test the internal time-lapse mode, and this I was actually very impressed by. So just like the 16 Mark II, this can actually shoot 4K internal time lapses as well as 1080p, but I'll put these side by side for you so you can see which one you think is better. So I mainly wanted to test out the video functionality of the 16 Mark II because that's mainly what I do with my cameras. So my fiance and I headed up to the hills to check out the Saku Blossom Festival, and all these next clips are shot directly from the M6 Mark II, so let me know what you think. So we are at the Saku SNR Orchards. We're getting ready for the cherry blossom season. So, alright, so I've been testing out the 15 to 45 mil lens that comes with it. It's a 3.5 to 6.3 aperture, but I want to get some sick shots, so I'm going to put a EF to EF-M adapter on it. I'm going to put the Sigma 18 to 35 f1.8. This gives them real nice depth of field, so we'll throw up that now.
Alright, so we found out that it's probably not the best thing to wear no shoes, as this one did, because there's long grass and we're getting, look at that, so wet, soaked, but absolutely beautiful here. Highly recommend coming out and checking it out. And the M6 Mark II is actually performing really, really well. Got some banger photos, how keen to edit them up. There are a few things that I'm finding that I'm not liking about the camera, but no, keep testing it out and we'll see what we think.
So I was seriously blown away with the image that was coming out of this tiny little camera. 4K video coming out of this is absolutely insane, and that was honestly one of the biggest things that I wanted to test out on this tiny little pocket camera. But now let's go through some pros and cons, and I'll tell you what I liked about it and why I didn't like about it. So first off, let's start with the pros. So the form factor of the camera is an absolute win. So the fact that it is so tiny and so portable is a massive benefit. However, once I rigged it out with some big lenses and some adapters, it kind of lost that portability, but I guess that's kind of the sacrifice that you make when you want to rig it out. The 4K video, like I said, is absolutely amazing. So it shoots at 120 megabit a second, which is plenty of data to get a nice clean image. The HDR video was another really impressive feature. However, the lack of manual settings in the HDR mode was a bit of a bummer. The 120 frames a second slow-mo in full HD was something that I'm not actually used to. The most I really shoot is 60 frames a second because that's just what my cameras can do, but it was really nice to test that and get that real super slow motion look. My only complaint is the low bitrate of 30 megabit a second. Trying to squeeze 100 frames a second into 30 megabits per second of data, you are gonna lose some quality, and that is quite noticeable. Another thing that really surprised me was the clean HDMI out. So clean HDMI is really reserved for like upper-end cameras, so to have that in this was super surprising. And finally, having the option to have focus peaking in video when you switch to manual mode is really a game changer. The only downside is that it is quite faint and hard to see compared to other cameras that I've used, but the fact that it's in there means that they are kind of looking at that indie filmmaker target. So those are the pros for me, but like everything, there has to be some cons. So let's go through some cons of what I found with my experience with this camera. So coming from a DSLR, the lack of a top LCD screen actually really bugged me. So the main thing I use the top LCD screen for is to check the battery level. And to check it on this, you kind of have to go through a few menus and it's only on one of them, which is kind of a bit annoying. And you kind of have to get used to it. Again, something compared to a DSLR is the grip. It's not very deep, but having such a slim form factor, I can understand exactly why they haven't made it much bigger. Another thing I found is that when in selfie mode like this, it's really hard to touch the bottom of the screen. And if you push it back just a little bit to get to the bottom of the screen, it actually flips, which then makes it even harder to adjust the settings. So that is definitely something you have to get used to. The lack of audio when shooting at 100 or 120 frames a second is not that big a deal for me, but I know for some people it is. However, the lack of autofocus in this mode is a little bit annoying, but the one-shot autofocus in this mode works very, very well, and that's what I actually use to get all my slow-mo stuff. And lastly, a few little things that are more of a personal preference for me are the fact that you can only shoot 4K when you're in the movie mode. And because of this, it means that you can't assign 4K settings to any of your custom modes. So why this is a thing for me is that because I try to set up my custom mode 1 to have 25 frames a second with 1/50th of a second shutter, and then I set the custom mode 2 to have 50 frames a second at 1/100th of a shutter. And then depending on if I want to shoot 25 frames a second or 50 frames a second, I just basically switch the dial and then I'm ready to go. However, a workaround to this is to use the movie mode to shoot your 4K and then use the custom modes to shoot your slow-mo. But the ultimate thing that unfortunately will stop me from getting this camera, and the reason that I wouldn't get a Sony camera, is the lack of an articulating screen. Now, call me silly, but honestly, since getting an articulating screen, this has absolutely changed my workflow and the way I shoot. The reason this is a big deal for me is that when you're shooting portrait and you're trying to shoot down low, the only way that you can see the screen is to get right down with it, and it's just not practical. Whereas on a DSLR with an articulating screen, you can actually just flip it down and then you can just shoot like this, and you don't have to worry about getting down a real awkward spot, and you can see everything that's happening. So all in all, I absolutely loved using this camera. It packs an absolute punch, and the 4K video that comes out of it is absolutely insane. And if you can get away without having an articulating screen, you will absolutely love this camera. So guys, I hope you've enjoyed my look at the brand new Canon M6 Mark II, and it's helped you figure out whether you'd like to get one or not. The best features by far are the 4K video and the small form factor. And also a massive thanks to Canon Australia and Camera Electronic for allowing me to check out the Canon M6 Mark II. If you want to learn more about it or you want to find out where to buy it, I'll leave links below and you can check out more down there. So if you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and let me know in the comments below what your favorite bit was. And if you're not subscribed, be sure to hit the subscribe button down here and turn on the bell to be notified every single time I release a new video. And as always, stay creative and I'll see you on the next one.